G'day to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. I'm just going to take this trail. It's going to lead us to a beach. I'm at a place down south on the south coast, and I'm very close to the Sussex Inlet. I just came from a private resort that has been set up there. As a kid, I used to come to St George's Basin all the time with my Auntie Frida, my Uncle George, my cousin Anna and family, and we used to holiday in St George's Basin for about 6 weeks every year, around about Christmas time. And I thought I'd come for a drive today, given that it was wet in Sydney, hoping that it wouldn't be wet all over. And it's a little bit wet here at the moment, as you can see. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go along this track. Haven't been along this track before, but as I said, we used to come to St George's Basin, which is next to Jervis Bay, back in the 70s for a number of years in a row and a holiday. And we used to come up Sussex Inlet with the boat from St George's Basin all the way up to the mouth here. And then as I got older and I got my driver's license, I discovered that you could actually drive to the mouth of the Sussex Inlet where it joins the ocean. And I used to come here with my Uncle George's little four-wheel drive. I used to come with my cousin, my auntie, and they were great times, great years, great times. And given that I'd come down the south coast today, I thought that it would be a good idea just to come to Green Patch. I went to Hyams Beach before, had a look around, and then as I was driving towards, as I said, along the road there at Jervis Bay, I discovered a little road which said 12 kilometres to a place called the Cove. And I had a hunch that it may have been that track that I used to drive along many years ago as a young man. So I said, bugger it, I'll just drive along here. So I drove along, and lo and behold, it got me to this resort, this private resort. I went to the reception, spoke to the guy there, and he said I could have a look around. I checked it out, had a look around. They've got cabin facilities there, they've got glamping facilities, and it's also got a function area for weddings and things like that. And it's somewhere that I want to come and check out one day with my wife and family. And what I'll do now is just go through this bush track, because apparently there is a beach here, and discover this beach for the first time. Never knew this beach was here, because back in the days there was no signage indicating where you're going and what was available around here. We didn't have Google Earth, we didn't have the internet, so people just discovered things on their own accord, as you'd imagine. But these days things are much easier and much more expensive, because to stay in a cabin down here is about $500 a night. So things have gone up market big time. So what I want to do today is do a bit of a walk and talk, and today I've got a book summary, so I'll just grab my book summary, so bear with me for a second, and I'll grab my book summary out of my pocket. Here we go. And the book summary that we're going to go through today is entitled The Shallows by an author named Nicholas Carr. So what are we going to learn with this book today? I'll put the umbrella down because it stopped raining. So what are we going to learn today from this book? So this book is all about understanding how we think, how the brain works, how we function, and to try and use that knowledge to identify ways in which we can have it work to our advantage and to support our development and growth. And the author goes on to say that we become neurologically what we think. So what does that mean? We become neurologically what we think. So however we think, or what we think about, what we focus on, is basically what helps shape our brains, shape our lives, shape our beliefs, and eventually it transforms us physically, mentally, emotionally into those thought patterns. So I'll just pick the umbrella up a bit more, just 1 second. Sorry for the mucking around, but it is starting to rain again. So we become neurologically what we think. And what we're saying here is that this book here is about how the internet impacts our ability to focus, and the fact that it also modifies our brain both neurologically and anatomically. So what we're saying is that we're surrounded by distractions, we're surrounded by technology, which can have a positive impact and or a negative impact on our development of our brain, because what science informs us is that the brain has a plasticity, and a plasticity means that it has an ability to alter its shape, alter its size, to flex, to grow, to shrink, depending on what it's subjected to and what it is made open to. Wow, how beautiful is this? I've got this massive ocean beach all to myself, and look at that dark sky, look at those clouds, look at that rain coming. And just over there, just around that little point, or before that big point, but just where it curves there, is the exit, or the opening to Sussex Inlet. And Sussex Inlet leads us into St George's Basin. What I'll do is I'll head back to the car just to get out of the elements, and we'll continue our walk and talk a little bit more about the shallows that this author talks about. So the book says here and reminds us that science informs us about the plasticity of the brain, and it enables the brain to change both neurologically and anatomically over time. So neurologically means that the brain can change the way it's connected, so the connections along the way, but it can also change anatomically its shape. So what it can do is it can grow and it can shrink based on how we use it. And we often say that if you don't use it, you lose it. And this is one of those books that emphasizes that very fact. So the plasticity of the brain, according to this book, is accelerated these days by the internet and technological advances. The virtual world, believe it or not, is impacting us, and impacting us all in a big way. I can see through my children, and now again I can see through my grandchildren, how the internet, how technology is affecting their growth and development in a positive way. And I'm sure if we overdo it, it'll impact them potentially in a negative way. But I can see my eldest granddaughter, getting onto YouTube and just watching all these, what I feel are educational sort of examples, where she can see things, she can learn things, She can learn forms of expression that can help her in her quest for knowledge. But what the author is saying is that because of the excitement and the range of product that is available across the board, and the way it stimulates the brain, it can change the way we're connected. It can increase the neural pathways and create many more connections, but it could also change different aspects or different areas of the brain, grow them, change their proportionality. Because I remember speaking to my spiritual father, who said that it's pretty hard to determine causality in science, especially when you do those brain scans and things like that. You know how they say that some people are born that way, and my spiritual father is a neurologist, so he knows what he's talking about when it comes to these sorts of things. And he said that occasionally you'll hear that a study was taken and they mapped a person's brain, and it was enlarged in a particular area which is different to other people's brains, and the inference that some people make is that, oh, that person is different and he was born that way, so we should accept the fact that people are different and they're born different. But what my spiritual father is saying is what actually happens is, depending on what you focus on, depending on what you're exposed to, depending on the thoughts that you repeatedly have over and over, all of those things conspire to alter the shape of your brain. Just like when you're exercising, just like when you go to the gym and you focus your exercise on your bicep, then your bicep is going to naturally get bigger and be bigger than the average person's biceps. And similarly, if you work on your legs and you focus the exercises on your legs over and over and over, then your legs are going to grow and be in a different proportion to what they were before, and different to the average person's legs. But that's because of the overuse through exercise, or the overuse of a person's brain, you could argue, through the over-exercising it with particular thoughts. So he says that when they do brain maps of people's brains, unless they take a map of a person's brain before it was exposed to certain stimuli and certain thoughts, and compared it to a control sample, which once again is hard, and then mapped it again following the stimuli, only then you could possibly say that a person was particularly born that way and they didn't just change into that particular person. So I'll just go back to the car and we'll just continue driving. But that's one of the key messages from this book, that the technology that we've got available to us these days will impact on the shape, the size, and the connections, the neural connections within a person's brain because of the technology. We grew up using books where we touched, we felt, we saw pictures. It was a different experience. You know, we had some dexterity to it. Whereas these days it's light, it's sound, it's an electronic party which is happening on your phone or on your iPad. And once again, as we said, the author is suggesting that this technology, that this technology is influencing the way people behave just bear with me. Just take this phone off and try and not lose the work we've done up until now. Open the window here. Beautiful. There we go. Start the engine, and we'll continue our book summary as I'm driving out of this property. Wow, that was good. Sometimes you need to be a bit of an adventurer and just check things out. So I'm sure that on a summer's day, that beach there would be spectacular, and you could walk all the way around to the entrance to Sussex Inlet and follow it along and experience something special there as well. So let's look at the formal points which come out of this book from this author. So what he's saying here is that our ability to concentrate and focus and stay focused diminishes as we use the internet. This is a very, very big point that I think a lot of us don't really appreciate, because what's happening in the world is that we're having a phenomenon, and we're all experiencing it in some way, shape or form, but the basic phenomenon is that people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. I remember when I was growing up, I had to learn to be patient. To do my homework, I had to get a book, had to go to the library, had to borrow the book, take it home, open the book up and read pages and pages and pages before I was able to find the answer. Whereas these days, with Google, you can just click in a keyword and you've got thousands of answers that can quickly satisfy your need. But with new generations coming through, with my grandchildren, for example, God bless them, because they are not having an exposure or a relatively higher exposure to bookwork, and it's more technologically based, then what's going to shape their futures is the fact that they may have shorter attention spans, which has its benefits but will also potentially have its limitations. So we need, I guess, and a call to action is we need to do something in order to help us to learn to stay focused for more. Because at this point in time, the author suggests that we can't stay focused for more than 2 minutes at a time, as the internet tends to make us more lazy, as we learn to learn superficially. So another book summary that I did maybe earlier in the week, last week, was the fact that we've got a superficial learning capacity, but we also need to learn things in depth in order to learn them better and to withhold them and to retain them, because anything we've done superficially tends to evaporate very, very quickly with time, unless we learn the context, learn the why, and then attach the facts and detail to it and apply it. So the whole issue that we face with technology these days, from this author's perspective, is that one of the things, there's another walking track over there that I could possibly try another time if it was a little bit drier, is that we're more superficial in our learning. And superficial is a profound way of thinking about it, because not only in our learning have we become superficial, but also in our relationships with with others, our relationship with God, and our relationship with ourselves. And it could be something that could be the source of some of the challenges that we face generationally, like depression, anxiety, and all of those things. It could be linked to that attention span, that we aren't able to focus on something for long enough to solve a particular issue that we have, and we're constantly flip-flopping and sidestepping from time to time. We live in a world where we're constantly bombarded by distractions. You're at work and you're constantly bombarded by your manager with emails from clients at all times of the day and all days of the week. We just don't get any downtime. And what happens is that the plasticity of the brain, according to the author, ends up falling for these tricks and shortcuts. And your brain, when it develops shallowly. So those connections are short, are narrow, and not all that engraved and with detail and richness, which means that I guess to a certain extent we're floating. We're not really people of substance, could be one way of suggesting it. So what else can we learn from this author? He says that our brain, believe it or not, gets addicted to our virtual world, where we have this interactivity which creates stimulus, and we're overstimulated a lot of the time, to the point where we just can't relax and we can't focus for long enough to form deeper relationships, as I said before, with ourselves, with our friends, our family, our peers, because there are so many distractions that we can get distracted with, but also the other party can get distracted with at the same time. So even if you do want to have a deep and meaningful and to engage more meaningfully with the people around you, what we're saying is that those people there could be not willing to engage back because of the distractions that the virtual world is providing them, this fear of not missing out that we all seem to be suffering, constantly looking at our phones, constantly expecting something to happen, and basically living a life of shallowness. So what happens, according to the author, from a scientific perspective, is that all of these virtual world interruptions and disruptions that we get create a dopamine spike where we get the pleasure hormones flowing in our bodies. So we're getting rewarded by these distractions and these interruptions. And what happens is, just like a drug addict, just like somebody who is addicted to substances, you want more and more. If you're looking or watching pornography, the dopamine hit that one would get initially wears off. So what the scientists say is that next time a person wants to indulge in pornography, they'll need to see something more hardcore, something more aggressive, abusive, until it gets to the point where you're just out of control, and hence why kids, when they're playing war games on their gaming devices, initially they start off with vanilla type games, and sooner or later they graduate to more hardcore, aggressive forms of entertainment, and that's because the dopamine hit doesn't get stimulated anymore by the vanilla type, and all of a sudden you need to have a Neapolitan type to get that response from your endocrine system. So what happens is, according to this author, the dopamine secretion into our body creates an insatiable craving, but this craving can only be satisfied by more and more and more toxic or more aggressive thoughts, and hence, when people start to think about their sexuality or start having those sorts of thoughts, they get rewarded initially, as we said, by their dopamine secretion from their endocrine system, but sooner or later they need more and more and more, and all of that vigorous reception and acceptance of higher and stronger stimulus shapes the brain in a different way, grows certain elements of the brain, and hence informs and affects the plasticity and the outcome of the brain. So we have insatiable appetites for certain things that will give us bigger and bigger hits, and that insatiable appetite takes away our ability to concentrate and increases our tendency to be distracted, because our reticular activating system in the brain is programmed to look for certain things to satisfy us. Each of us determine what we have or what we want in our life, and what is dangerous, what is pleasing, and depending on what happens, then we have our the biases. So our brain will focus more intently on those things, and force our brain, as we said before, to grow in particular ways. So what are we saying here? What we're saying here is that we need to be careful with what we do and how we do it, how we think, because it impacts in a direct and an indirect way, both consciously and subconsciously, our brain, and the impacts are not temporary. They can stay with you, because you're constantly, consciously and subconsciously, drawn to these things, constantly distracted, and they keep on playing on your mind, and you don't get any peace from the demons that keep on attacking you, so to speak. So the author goes on to say that spending too much time online can lead to burnout and tiredness. We need to have a break from the overstimulation that comes from the internet, and the internet is designed in a way to keep us hooked. You can just chop and change and go from here to there and cycle and get into a loop, a never-ending loop of looking here, there and everywhere. And what the author is saying here is that can have an impact. That can have an impact on your life. I'll just get out for a second, so just bear with me. It's a nice little look out from here, from what I can see. Put it in park, otherwise the car's going to end up in water. How peaceful is it here? Look at this. How beautiful. Absolutely magnificent. I'll try and walk down to the water's edge without sinking, I hope. But this is pure ambience, pure peace, relaxation. Just check it out from where I am. Look at the sky reflecting off the water. How beautiful. So the internet keeps us hooked for hours, according to the author, and we don't need the author to tell us this. We know it ourselves, that we can spend hours and hours looking at the internet and cycling through it. And it's an addiction, and it tailors our connections. We are presented with more bits of information in a week than our ancestors had in an entire lifetime. Let me say that one more time, because it is really powerful. So what we're saying here is that we are bombarded with more information, with more data in a week than what our ancestors had in their entire lifetimes. That is just absolutely amazing and frightening to think that my granddaughters, for example, in their lifetimes are going to be exposed to more distractions and more information than what I or my parents were exposed to in their entire lifetimes, or my entire lifetime. It's just exponentially growing at a rapid rate. So we need significantly more cognitive power to process it, make sense of it, and we are indulging in many ways in information overload, hence leading to mental health issues, anxiety, depression, because what the author is saying is that the brain just can't handle the overload that people are experiencing, not through their own fault, but through the fault of the technology which is available and impacting their lives. I'll just go along here. If I end up in the water, we can all have a bit of a laugh. So this is St George's Basin, everybody. I used to come here as a kid for many, many years. I used to fish these waters and ski these waters, swim these waters on the other side somewhere. I don't know exactly where I was, but it is a massive body of water which joins the ocean, but it doesn't have much of a tidal flow, as you could probably imagine. So getting back to what we're saying here, is we're saying that we tend to have a lot more information come our way than what other people, other generations would have had in their lifetimes. In fact, in 1 week, we get more overload, more information than what most people get in an entire lifetime. And hence why we feel exhausted, because we are not designed nor programmed for so much information processing, and we need to interrupt it at some point in time to feel to gain peace. To gain peace in our life is what we're saying. We need to interrupt because the continual stimulus will not allow us to rest mentally. So every now and then we need a reset. We need to say enough is enough, no more for today, for this week, for the month, and to detox from the internet, which is virtually impossible, especially if you're working and your life revolves around a computer. So the last thing that the author talks about is the importance of having unstructured time and time spent in nature, doing exactly what I'm doing here, just getting out in nature, just breaking away and just being one with this absolute beauty. I just can't describe to you how peaceful, how absolutely peaceful it is where I am here. You could pitch a tent here, build a house, some fish over there just having a go. So see the fish break the water over there. So while it's peaceful over here, the fish are having a bit of a field day, feeding on the little fish. So we need some unstructured time spent in nature, and we need to solve the constant distress that we appear to be under, and to stop being overwhelmed. We need to elope with nature and force ourselves to disconnect from the internet. We need to switch off. We need to get bored, do something else, to recover, to reset, to go for a walk, and not to continually get sucked into the vortex of busy, getting things done, being online and fearing that we're going to miss out. Because what the author is suggesting here is that connection can be dangerous, because as we said before, we are subject to a lot more disturbances, a lot more disruption, a lot more stimulation than what our ancestors, what our parents, our grandparents were. And we're getting overloaded with information, where we're getting more in 1 week than what our parents got in an entire lifetime. That in itself is a wake-up call and a call to action. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Jim's 5am Club, where you've been able to vicariously join me on this journey, this adventure. And I hope you can appreciate where we are. I haven't been here for 45 years, and I'd almost forgotten how beautiful and how unique it actually is. So take care. I look forward to chatting to you again, and I'll come to you again from a different place with a different message of empowerment, where oh, there you go. Can you hear the thunder? A lot of thunder happening around me here, so we're about to cop a big storm. So I better get back to the car. What I'll do is I'll take a couple of photos here, because it looks like an ideal place for a photo. Anyway, it's starting to rain. The pitter-patter is coming down on the water now, as you can see. And we'll chat again. Take care, everybody. Yassas. Bye for now.